There are children who are born with the whole sky watching over them. But there are also those born in the shadows, nameless, forgotten, with no one to turn to, as if the world had simply erased their existence. Noah was one of those children. No father, no mother, no hope. Only hunger, beatings, and the cold silence of a life abandoned. And yet, from the depths of that despair, a flame quietly began to burn. The flame of knowledge, of willpower, and an unshakable belief that I was not born to bow my head. This is not just a story about a poor boy. It's the journey of a soul that dared to rise from the mud, to become a beacon of light for thousands of others. The story of Noah and his fight to reclaim the dignity of being human. Noah was born in a crumbling room, where the moldy walls couldn't even keep out the cold that crept in through every crack. It was the filthiest slum in the city, a place where people rushed through each day just to forget the bitter truth, that they were merely surviving, not truly living. His mother was a frail woman who worked day and night just to earn scraps of food. Noah never knew his father's face, and he never dared to ask. When he turned 4, his mother died from exhaustion, with no money for treatment. Her death was quiet, just like the way she lived, unnoticed and soon forgotten. After a simple funeral, Noah was taken in by his grandmother, the only person left in his life. She became his final shelter of peace. But then, on a gloomy morning when Noah had just turned 6, she took him to a labor camp on the outskirts of town. She told him she'd come back, but she never did. Noah stood there, silent. He didn't cry. He didn't understand what had just happened. All he knew was that he'd been left behind, again. And this time, it was forever. From that moment on, one truth carved itself into his heart. In this life, no one's coming to save you, and no one's coming back unless you keep walking forward. The labor camp where Noah was left behind was no place for a child. But like every other abandoned kid, he was thrown into the category of small workers, a cruel label to mask the brutal truth of exploitation. No one cared that he was only 6. In this place, age meant nothing. He had to work like an adult, endure like an adult, and disappear like a shadow. Each day began before the sky even had a chance to lighten. Noah, along with dozens of other children, was herded into the yard. They were assigned tasks, sorting scrap metal, carrying bricks, collecting garbage, scrubbing factory floors. His tiny hands quickly grew calloused. His small feet became used to wounds that never healed. He learned how to grit his teeth through the pain, how to hide his tears behind the darkness, how not to ask, because questions only brought more pain. The camp supervisors didn't use whips. They used looks of disdain and voices cold as steel. They didn't have to yell, just one glare, and the kids would tremble with fear. And when someone made a mistake, sometimes just dropping a tool from sheer exhaustion. Punishments came swiftly. No food, kneeling on gravel through the night, or worse, being hung by the arms in a freezing dark shed for hours. Noah couldn't remember how many times he'd been punished. He couldn't even remember the last time he smiled. At night, curled up on a thin mat, he would hear the breathing of other children, short, broken gasps, as if each of them was clinging to life by a thread. Yet amidst all the bitterness, Noah held on to one thing: his eyes. There was still a flicker in them, something no one could extinguish. Not hope. Hope was too expensive here. But a question. A quiet, stubborn question that repeated itself in his mind every night. Why do I have to live like this? Why, just because I was born here, does my whole life have to be caged? He didn't have the answer. But that very question kept him alive. Because it made him refuse to accept, refuse to surrender. And one day, because of a single torn piece of newspaper, that question would lead him to the one thing that would change everything. Words. Noah discovered the power of the written word on a scorching afternoon, while sweeping the dusty corner of an old workshop behind the kitchen. Amid a pile of trash, he stumbled upon a crumpled scrap of newspaper, its ink smeared and faded. Yet the rows of text still stood tall, as if each line carried a soul of its own. He couldn't understand what it said, but his eyes couldn't look away. There was something strange about those symbols. They weren't just ink on paper. they were voices, a kind of force, mysterious and immense, whispering the possibility of a door that Noah had never dared to imagine. The very next day, while delivering tools to a repairman, Noah overheard the white owner's son practicing the alphabet with his mother. Hiding behind a wooden panel, his heart pounded with every carefully pronounced letter. B, C. From that moment on, Noah was no longer just the quiet, obedient boy. Every time he got the chance to be near one of the white kids in the workshop, he found a way to approach them, with a smile, a piece of stale bread, even offering up his only meal of the day. In return, he asked for letters. Just letters. One day, he stole a stub of chalk and scribbled alphabets on the back of a wooden crate, beneath the flickering yellow light. Another day, he used a stick to trace words into the dirt, erasing them quickly at the sound of approaching footsteps. Every letter learned was a small victory. Every word read felt like a breath of air in a life that was suffocating. Little by little, Noah began to spell. Then he began to read labels on boxes, messages on wrappers, headlines on discarded newspaper scraps. He read everything he could get his hands on, as if stopping for even 1 second would cause knowledge to slip through his fingers forever. And then, one cold, windy night, he found it, an old, torn book tossed near the storage shed. It was a worn-out copy of The People's Voice, a simple political reader meant for factory workers. To Noah, it was treasure. Every sentence, every paragraph, lit up like a lamp showing the way. For someone walking blind through the dark, words became his escape, his weapon, his companion. Noah was no longer just a forgotten child. Something had awakened in him, and this time, it wasn't a quiet flicker, but a roaring flame. If I can read, if I can write, then I can learn how to change everything. When Noah finished reading the very first book of his life, he realized something profound. Knowledge didn't just have the power to save himself, it could save others, those trapped in the same despair he had once drowned in. From that moment, a thought began to grow inside him, stronger with each passing day. He couldn't keep that light for himself. He had to share it with the ones still stuck in the darkness he once knew too well. The children in the camp, the silent adults who bowed their heads, the forgotten souls the world had given up on. Noah began searching, quietly, patiently, for those who still carried a flicker of hope. At first, it was just a few small children, kids who shared food with him, worked beside him, kids who knew the sting of hunger and the slap of a belt. When night fell, after the day's labor was done, Noah would gather them behind the storage shed, where the light didn't reach and the dirt was soft. There, with a stick in his hand, he taught them to draw letters into the earth. A, B, C. Each stroke a fragile piece of a dream stolen too soon. Over time, his class grew. 5 kids, then 10, then nearly 40, both young and old. No one used their real names. Everyone had a code name, part game, part shield. They called Noah the boy with the eyes that speak, because he didn't have to shout. He didn't need to beg or plead. All it took was one look from him, and they believed that knowledge was real, that freedom was real. Noah taught them how to spell their names, taught them how to rewrite their stories with words, not scars. And more than anything, he taught them this. They deserved to know. They deserved to dream. Every lesson was a declaration. You were not born just to fade away in silence. But light never spreads without resistance. And the deeper it reached, the louder the darkness roared. It didn't take long for the camp supervisors to discover the secret school. And they were furious. Not because they feared escape, but because they feared thought. Because once a child learns to read, they learn to question. They learn to resist. They stop bowing their heads. One morning, they stormed in. Books were torn and burned. Children were beaten until their mouths bled. And Noah was dragged away and locked in the dark storage room for 3 days. But inside him, there was no darkness anymore, because Noah now understood the one truth they could never take away. Once words enter your heart, they never leave. After the secret school was destroyed, Noah was sold off to another camp, one even farther away and far more brutal. This place made no attempt to hide its cruelty. There were no masks of kindness, no pretend rules, no polite lies to justify the whip or veil the insults. Here, there was only one law: the weak will be crushed. Noah's new master was known as the smiling beast. He didn't need a reason to beat you. A wrong glance, a breath taken too long, or simply his own boredom. Any of it was enough to bring the whip down. Noah, now 17, became his favorite target. Because in Noah's eyes, there was still something left unbroken. A light, a fire, and that fire irritated him. So he tried to crush it. In the first week, Noah was beaten bloody for spilling a bucket of water. In the second, he was forced to stand in the blistering sun for hours. No food, no drink, because he was too defiant. The lash tore through his back like knives. But Noah said nothing, not because he was afraid, but because he was waiting for the pain to teach him something, waiting for his spirit to rise past survival, waiting to know, once and for all, that he could no longer live like a shadow. Then, one early morning, as the smiling beast grabbed Noah by the collar, grinning with madness and raising the whip for the who knows how many time, Noah reached out and caught his wrist. No one had ever done that before. No one dared to look the master in the eye. But Noah did. The beast roared, lunging like an animal, and Noah fought back. The fight lasted nearly 2 hours. One skinny, worn-down teenager against a man who had broken hundreds. Blood spilled, bones cracked, sweat mixed with dust, and no one stepped in. They only watched, silent, aching and hopeful. In the end, it wasn't the beast's body that gave out. It was his will. Because in Noah, he didn't just face fists. He faced someone who no longer feared pain. Someone who had already been through the fire and come out the other side, still standing. From that day forward, no one dared to lay a hand on him. Not out of fear of another beating, but because they saw something in him they hadn't seen in years. The dignity of being human. Noah didn't need to speak. He only needed to stand, back straight, eyes clear, and unafraid. And in that silence, he sent out a message louder than any speech. I'm not a slave, and I will never be one again. After that fateful fight, Noah was no longer just a boy tormented in silence. He had stepped out of the shadows, eyes wide open, with a will no one could bend. But while his spirit was free, his body was still shackled by the cruel machinery of oppression. And Noah knew, if he truly wanted to live, he had to escape. The first time he tried to run was on a rainy night. He made it only a few miles before he was caught. The master didn't beat him. He just smiled and locked Noah in the cold storage room for 3 days. It was a silent message. No one escapes this place. The second time, Noah wasn't alone. He ran with his closest friend. But halfway through the journey, his friend was injured, unable to continue. And Noah couldn't leave him behind. They both returned, heads held high, but hearts bleeding. 2 failed attempts. But Noah never stopped trying. Then came a misty October morning. The fields were still draped in fog when Noah climbed aboard a freight train heading north. On his back was an old Navy coat, borrowed from a kind man who worked near the docks. In his hand was a fake transit pass scrawled in a shaky hand, written by the very boy who once learned his first letters in the dirt. That journey, every minute was a knife's edge between life and death. One suspicious glance, one unexpected question. It could all come crashing down. But Noah stayed calm, because for the first time in his life, freedom wasn't just a dream. It was close enough to breathe. And finally, he crossed the state line, into a land where no chains waited. For the first time ever, Noah breathed as a free man. But that freedom wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. Noah didn't run to forget. He ran to speak. He began sharing his story, first in small gatherings, where people listened in stunned silence. Not because he was eloquent, but because he was honest. Every scar on his back was living proof. Every word he spoke cut deep into the conscience of anyone willing to listen. From one forum to the next, from tiny halls to towering churches, the name Noah began to echo as a living testimony of what slavery could do and what the human spirit could endure. But he didn't just tell his story. He told the stories of thousands who never got the chance to speak. And with every word, he planted seeds of understanding, of hunger for change, of justice. Because to Noah, freedom wasn't just about surviving. It was about making life matter. Freedom had opened the first door for Noah, but it was knowledge and courage that helped him step into history. As Noah's speeches began to spread, anti-slavery organizations across the North started inviting him to speak. People weren't just amazed that he was a literate former slave. They were moved by how he wielded words like a blade, cutting through lies, stirring hearts, leaving no one able to turn away from the truth. Before long, Noah was appointed as the official spokesperson for one of the largest anti-slavery groups in the North. And from a boy once beaten for learning the alphabet, he became a journalist, an author, and even the founder of the first anti-slavery newspaper run by a black man. Each article he wrote was a thunderclap against injustice. Each speech, a torch lighting hope in forgotten corners. Of course, not everyone welcomed his voice. While traveling to give talks, Noah was chased by angry mobs, beaten unconscious, and nearly killed. But no matter how many wounds he bore, he rose again. Because to Noah, truth was never negotiable. He didn't stop with the fight against slavery. Noah raised his voice for gender equality, advocating for women's right to vote at a time when few dared to speak. He knew freedom can't be selective. It's either for all or means nothing at all. His name spread far beyond activist circles. He was invited to meet with lawmakers, eventually becoming an advisor to the President of the United States, offering counsel on fair treatment of black soldiers, and helping push forward voting rights for black Americans. After the fall of slavery, and then, Noah, a boy once sold like property, became the first black man to hold high office in the U.S. government. Later, he was nominated as a vice presidential candidate, though he never campaigned. But that didn't matter, because by then, he had already become something far more powerful, a living symbol, a voice no chain could silence. Until the end of his life, Noah kept writing. He taught. He inspired. He didn't leave behind gold or riches, but he left behind a fire that still burns, in the hearts of those who come after him. Noah's journey is a modern epic, and if there's one lesson his life teaches us, it's this. We may be born in chains, but we were born to walk upright, never bowed. Many years after Noah left this world, his name still echoed, not just in books or statues, but in the quiet, powerful way people remembered him. His story wasn't just about pain. It was a declaration, a defiant anthem of a soul that refused to live on its knees. Noah wasn't a saint. He stumbled. He trembled. He even wanted to give up. But what made him different was that every time he fell, he stood up, stronger than before. That perhaps was his greatest legacy, the belief that anyone, yes, anyone, can change their destiny and even change the course of history if they have the courage to begin. Noah's worth was never in the titles he earned, nor in the bronze statues raised in his honor. His real value lived in quieter places, in every child who learned to read, because of the secret classes he once held under the whip, in every woman who stood tall and demanded to be heard, inspired by his speeches, in every black voter who stepped into a polling booth for the first time, tears rolling down their cheeks, knowing their freedom was paid for in blood. Tears, and the unshakable will of people like Noah. Noah's journey is a living reminder. Never underestimate the power of one person who dares to learn, even when they're forbidden to. Never believe that a small voice cannot shake an empire. Noah taught us that. Knowledge is the blade that cuts through chains. That education is not just a privilege. It's the path to liberation. And that justice never grows in silence. Every generation will face its own battles. But as long as we remember Noah, we'll know how to keep walking forward. Because as he once told the young souls who came after him, if you were born in the dark, don't let that stop you from lighting the world. If they won't give you a door, build your own path. And if you ever feel tired, remember this. The freedom you hold today was once the burning dream inside the heart of a little boy named Noah. In the end, As the twilight of life slowly fell, Noah, the boy once torn from his mother's arms before he could even speak a word, didn't choose to leave this world with hatred. He chose to leave with light, with a single sentence, simple, almost unremarkable, that ignited the hearts of thousands still fighting in the shadows. If you want freedom, you have to learn how to fight for it. No one will hand it to you. It wasn't a poetic line meant to be admired. It was a warning, a declaration, a promise spoken by someone who had tasted the very edge of pain, that no matter how deep the wound, there's always a path back to your feet, if you dare to walk it. Noah understood something deeply. There is no miracle that frees people from injustice. No hero comes if we refuse to rise. No change ever comes unless it begins with a fire within. He once said, "People want the harvest, but won't till the soil. They want the rain, but reject the thunder. They long for calm seas, but refuse the storm." Life is struggle, and that's what makes it precious. Today, Noah's name might not appear in textbooks, but that sentence, that truth, still travels from voice to voice, heart to heart, through every generation rising up to reclaim their voice, their justice, their worth. We may not wear iron chains anymore, but sometimes fear, silence, and despair are prisons far more suffocating. And in those moments, Noah's words return, like a bell tolling in the soul, waking the ones who've forgotten how to dream. If you want freedom, you have to learn how to fight for it. Noah's story doesn't end in glory. It ends in legacy, not carved in stone, but carried in the hearts of those who believe. That struggle is the only road to true freedom. And friend, if today you feel tired, if you're on your knees, if the world feels too heavy to bear, remember this: a boy born with nothing, beaten for learning to read, once changed an entire era, simply because he refused to live like a shadow. And if he could do it, so can you, as long as you're willing to fight. Noah is gone, but his story has never truly ended, because somewhere in this vast world, there are still children growing up in the shadows. Shadows of poverty, injustice, and prejudice. There are still voices silenced the moment they dare to speak. Still trembling hands tracing their first letters. Caught between fear and hope. And somewhere else, maybe here, maybe now, there's you, quietly carrying a question. Can I do something that matters? The answer might be found in the eyes of that boy from long ago. Noah's eyes. Eyes that held nothing but a hunger to live a life that meant something. Noah wasn't a hero in a cape. He was just a child who refused to stay silent. And sometimes, the world doesn't need someone perfect. It just needs someone willing to begin. So today, if you're listening to this story, pause and ask yourself, will I choose to stay quiet? Or will I write the next chapter in the story Noah began? Because sometimes, all it takes to change history is one person who believes they can. Thank you for listening to Noah's story, a journey that wasn't just about one soul rising against all odds, but a powerful reminder that within each of us lies a quiet strength just waiting to be awakened. Noah showed us that you don't have to be born at the finish line to do something extraordinary. You just need the courage to begin, the hunger to learn, and the strength to rise, even when the whole world turns its back on you. If you've ever doubted your worth, if you've ever felt small in a world that moves too fast, remember this: even in the darkest of days, a single spark can light the way for an entire generation. And maybe, just maybe, the one who writes the next chapter in that story is you. We'll see you again in the next story, where together we'll keep lighting the fire from hearts that refuse to go dark. This is BraveSpark Channel, where every story has the power to ignite a soul. Stay brave, stay inspired, and as always, stay blessed.